What's up, military millionaires? I'm your host, David Pere, and I am here with the man, the myth, the legend, Gabriel Hamel, who is, as I was mentioning before we started recording, one of the most downloaded episodes of this podcast of all time. Gabriel is a National Guard vet. He's also a seller financing master, the king of diamond push-ups, and has done now since the last time we talked. He's gotten into mobile home parks, but has never had to syndicate a deal and has over 200 doors under his belt. And I would just say financially free and lives a life that if you follow him online, you probably know it's a life that a lot of people look up to, right? You have the freedom to do what you want when you want, post cool quotes and travel cool places and spend time with your family. And just a cool guy. So Gabriel, it's always fun. So welcome back on the Military Millionaire Podcast.
Yeah, thanks, David. I appreciate you having me back. Looking forward to it.
Of course, brother. So can you give just a short update for those who haven't listened yet? And I'll link in the show notes. You need to go listen to his first episode because we're going to skip past a lot of that and do updates. But just a short intro to yourself. Welcome to the Military Millionaire Podcast, where we teach service members, veterans, and their families how to build wealth through personal finance, entrepreneurship, and real estate investing. I'm your host, David Pere, and together with my co-host, Alex Felice, we're here to be your no BS guides along the most important mission you'll ever embark on, your finances.
Vehicle 1, you're clear to depart friendly lines.
Roger, Vic 1, Oscar Mike.
Yeah. I don't want to cover too much of the same stuff as last time, but kind of a quick intro. High school wasn't my thing. I stayed in high school mostly for the social aspect, and I was a high school wrestler. And I read Rich Dad Poor Dad a couple years after high school, and I was like, yes, this makes sense. First book I ever read where I'm going, this actually makes sense. Also, to back up, I had joined the Army National Guard in 1999, so it was my middle of my senior year of high school. Graduated in 2000. So I was pretty fired up, like, hey, I'm going to invest in real estate. That's how I'm going to build wealth. And then I ended up getting called up and sent to Iraq in 03 and 04. And so I hadn't bought a property yet, but I was determined. And I said this probably last time, but I was telling all my buddies, like, I'm going to come back. I'm going to build wealth. I'm going to be financially free. And I'm going to do that through real estate. And they were like, man, you're an idiot. Like, what do you like how? What are you talking about? You were living in your, in your buddy's attic for, $80 a month or $100 a month or whatever it was. What makes you think you can do it? And I said, I have no idea how, but I'm going to find a way. Bought my first couple of houses during the subprime, 05, 06, when they were just giving money away. And when 2008 hit, the bank said, screw you. You don't have a job. You don't have money. And I had to go the seller financing route. So not to get into it too much and to repeat myself from last time, but I basically had a minimum wage job after doing a bunch of odd and end stuff. And, I was tired of it. I was like, how do I replace this income? So I did a seller finance deal. It was 4 units that replaced that income almost to the dollar. And so I became financially free really fast and really young, but I was poor. I was broke. Like I was living off less than $1,500 a month cash flow, but I was essentially financially free. I was like out of the rat race. And that was kind of that big goal. And that's kind of the start of my real estate investing story.
I think that's cool because a lot of people, right? So you mentioned that and you say it almost like it's a downside, right? But it's like there's all these different components of trying to retire. And a lot of people get wrapped up on it's almost like there's like the index fund world of financial independence and the real estate world. The index fund world of financial independence is like slash your expenses, live below your means, be frugal, put your money away, take 4% out, be able to live off that, just invest, and then live off this little bit and you'll be good. The real estate side of financial independence is like, I need to have so much money every month coming in. And it's kind of comical to me because I'm exiting the rat race this year and I am by no means the like flashy tens of thousands of dollars of worth of, income through cash flow. In fact, my wife is going to she's going to keep working because she wants to keep working. But I have enough money that I'll be able to cover all my expenses and still continue to put money into real estate to grow that. While she works, I could probably be okay if she didn't work. But I think it's just cool that you said like $1,500 a month, like you were like lean. Hey, we're free, but not like I'm driving a Bentley free. I think that's a good spot to be in.
Yeah, it was crazy times, right? Like 2008, I had shut down a little nutrition store that wasn't making money. My first son was born in 2008. And so it was definitely like this, oh shit moment. I mean, like I mean, by 2010, I had my second child and a 2-year-old, right? And so I was all in. Like I basically put myself in a position to have no plan B. I was like, this is how I'm going to become wealthy. And I wasn't focused on making money. I was focused on building wealth. And I just looked at that differently. Like, so, I believe in abundance. That started out with that frugality mindset of like, I just don't need something that's not an asset. Like my liabilities now are paid for by the assets that I've purchased over the years. And it took a lot to get my mind out of that mindset of frugality, right? Because I didn't own new shoes. I mean, I remember my wife convinced me like, hey, you can buy $100 rain jacket. You live in Oregon, it rains, like it's okay, right? Like you can at least, but it's like, that's where my mind was at. I was like, assets, liabilities, kept it simple. If it's not an asset, I'm not going to buy it. I mean, I drove a lot of shitty cars, while my friends were financing fancy stuff they couldn't afford. But, I do believe, like 10 years of investing right and investing smart can set you up for a lifetime and potentially generations to come.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that's an interesting balance to try to strike too, because people get wrapped up in like, there's the keep up with the Joneses, but then there's the side of the spectrum that people don't talk about is when you get so wrapped up in frugality that you don't allow yourself to have any luxuries, like you mentioned, like $100 rain jacket when you live somewhere that rains all the time, right? It's like there's this like balance, and there's a lot of people on either extreme of like, there's obviously the people who have no assets and a ton of liabilities, and it's very common, unfortunately. And then there's the people who have assets, but it's like the guy I remember in high school. I delivered this pizza to a guy who had like a really nice Porsche. I don't want to say Ferrari, but like 3 cars that were clearly 6-figure cars in his garage in a gated community in a really big $1 million home. And this is in Arkansas. So $1 million home is saying something. And the dude made me drive back to Domino's 15 minutes away to pick up the change because of the coins. Like I had dollar bills to give him even change, but he wouldn't let me just give him the extra dollar and let him keep the 30 cents. And he wouldn't let me keep the 70 cents as a tip. And he was just straight up like, no, you got to drive back. I want my 70 cents, like no tip. And I just remember thinking like, I don't ever want to be that kind of wealthy where I can't spend 70 cents to tip a delivery driver. Yeah,
no way. And it's like, I found like just the practicality of karma, like the more I give, it just comes back, tenfold. And it's, that was a challenge initially. Like I remember being like, oh, when I get to a point, right. But I found the more giving I am, whether it's with my time or my money, like that's valuable, and I'm not willing to just be focused on all the little things, right? Like I want to tip people big that are doing their job well. Like I want to be able to give to people because I can. And that's important.
Yeah. Yeah. I like that. The book, The Go-Giver, that talks about, the more you give, the more you get back. And like the fact that the money is a currency. I think that's a pretty cool concept. And I've definitely noticed, I think it's almost comical to watch people who worry about money, not like they struggle, as opposed to people who are just kind of like, yeah, not to say that you can't care about money, right? But like the more you try to hold your cash, the less cash you are. It's kind of a weird dynamic, I guess.
No, I agree 100%. I mean, I look at money as a game, right? And unless someone's willing to, and there's a handful of people, like I know one personally, right, that completely lived off grid, did their own thing. Like they had essentially time freedom, right? Like they were living their life that way. But most people in some way are tied into money in some way. They either work for it, and I've had a lot of people throughout, especially when I first started, buying real estate, would say, oh, I don't care about money. And I'm like, look, I think you care about money more than I do, because you're showing up to a job every day working for money. So if you're going to be in the money game, why not win it? Like I enjoy building wealth, and I'm not focused on the money aspect of it. I'm focused on what can I do with building that wealth, and what can that provide for my family and my life. And it actually provides what to me is the most important, is that time freedom, the ability to do what I want to do, how I want to do it, when I want to do it. And, I think a lot of people go into, whether it's a job or into investing, with the idea of some level of financial security and freedom that they want. And then oftentimes they get stuck in the job, or they even get stuck in the business that they built, and they forget why they wanted a job or why they wanted to build that business in the first place. So I think it's just important to get clear on what you want and then actually build something that supports that.
Yeah. Yeah, I agree 100%. All right. So you have a bunch of properties that you own, seller financing, kind of single family. What point did you, I guess, why mobile home parks? Did you kind of stumble into that, or is that an asset class you started pursuing? What was kind of the transition there from normal seller financing into the bigger assets?
Yeah, it's a good question. So I talked a lot about on the last time I was on just the seller financing. Everything from 2009 through 13 was no money down seller financing deals, and that's really how I built a lot of my portfolio up. And it was a lot of small, medium size multifamily stuff: 2 units, 6 units, 8 units, some a little bigger, 15, 20 unit type stuff. But I just saw the cap rates were being condensed down to nothing. The returns were being condensed down to almost nothing in the larger multifamily. And I just felt like there was an opportunity in the mobile home park space. I felt like it's fairly recession proof. I feel like they operate a lot like multifamily. There's a lot of upside. And a lot of the sellers, a lot of the owners of these mobile home parks, they're very familiar with seller financing. And, there is financing for mobile home parks, but there hasn't always been, and it's not as typical as, say, a single family home or even multifamily. And so the conversation with a mobile home park owner on seller financing is pretty easy to have, because those sellers, in a lot of cases, have purchased with seller financing or they sold with seller financing before. So it's just an easy conversation to have.
I didn't realize. I mean, that makes sense, because a lot of banks, I was talking to a buddy of mine, Jeremy, just yesterday, who was like, the two things that banks, he was talking to local bankers. He's like, the two things they don't want to lend on right now, they don't want to touch: hotels, mobile home parks. And I was like, well, why mobile home parks? He's like, I don't know. They don't ever want to touch mobile home parks. I'm like, that's kind of interesting. I guess it kind of makes sense. It's kind of got a stink eye in some ways for, lower class, but it's a good asset class. I totally understand hotels right now. I mean, that's the pandemic kind of slashed hotel businesses. I might have a chance to buy one off a bank here soon that try to turn into assisted living or something. But
well, and in general too, like I've never, other than those first 3 properties that I bought during the subprime in 05, 06, 07, which I don't know if you can even consider those traditionally financed. I've never traditionally financed a property ever. I've never got a traditional bank loan on a property. For one, I think it's a lot easier to go from seller financing and refi into long-term debt, long-term financing. Eventually, after doing this for a decade, I borrowed private money and hard money. Same thing. I feel like it's a lot easier to go in with less money, own the property, and it's a lot easier to refi into long-term debt because you already own the asset. And I think banks are willing. I mean, everything I bought in 09 through 13, I refinanced in 2014 because all those properties appraised out. If I would have tried to buy those during that time with bank financing, they would have wanted me to bring 30% to the table every single time. So if you own an asset that cash flows, whether you bought it with private money, hard money, seller financing, and you've come into that deal with way less money down, it cash flows when you buy it, and there's upside potential, and you can get that property to function as you plan. I think it's just easier to do that value add and then refi.
Yeah, I mean, I agree completely. In fact, we talked about it. We mentioned it briefly before the recording, but my best deal, really the only thing I've ever had seller financing in. I've done a lot of low money down deals where it was either like a cash purchase on a property where I got it for like 20% of the ARV, or maybe even less in some cases. I just bought a property for $12,000. Like, awesome. Yeah, okay, yeah, I'll pay cash for that. Okay, I don't really worry about whatever. But I've also, I've done some other like FHA, whatever. But the one property that I bought with seller financing involved was 85% bank, 10% seller. I paid like 4.9% down on a 10 unit. And I was in the process of refinancing, and I've already refinanced and paid everyone out, including myself, but I was going to refinance again and pull more capital out and reinvest it. And I just got an off-market offer that was enough to, it's like, oh, okay, that's 1,000% return. I'll walk. But I mean, I paid $10,900 down on a property because of like $20,000 in seller financing and then the remainder bank. And I would have never been able to get into that property. And I mean, that thing's legitimately changed the entire ability for me to EAS because I'm going to pay off all my bad debt, anything other than mortgages, and I'll have almost 100K in capital when I'm done with that thing, off a property that I paid less than 11 grand into. So it's been incredible for me.
Yeah, and that's hard to do. That's hard to do with traditional financing. It just is.
Yeah. So you get into mobile home parks and you find that mobile home they're open to seller financing. You've now got four parks, right?
Yeah, four parks.
How do you, I mean, it's kind of a scary leap, I guess. Like that just seems kind of like a crazy, like, okay, from all right, single family home to mobile home park, all seller financing. Like, how was that transit? Like, how did that go on the operations side? Are you running the operations on that? Did you hire that out? How are you messing with that?
No. So it's kind of interesting because I think it parallels kind of my 2008 leading up to 2009, and 2020 kind of parallels leading up to 2021. So
definitely feels like we're in a peak.
Right. And so kind of going back, before I did my first seller finance deal, I spent all of 2008 looking at Craigslist every single night, talking to people, telling people what I was looking for, building relationships, right? So I went through the process. I analyzed a lot of deals until I found that first seller finance deal where I felt very comfortable to pull the trigger. And then I bought a property with seller financing, another one with seller financing, another one with seller financing. So mobile home park, similar in the sense of I did one deal mid-2019. I did a seller financing deal, which we could dive into that deal. It was a 2% down deal, 200% cash on cash return. It was just a phenomenal purchase. There was a lot of upside, but that was the end of 2019. And then I didn't buy anything in 2020. First year that I hadn't bought a property since 2008. But I was going through the process. I looked at a lot of deals. I analyzed a lot of deals. I was building relationships. I was telling people what I was looking for. And then, on December 31st of 2020, I was all of a sudden in contract on 4 mobile home parks. Two of those I pulled out of, and 2 of those I purchased. Part of that was like, hey, I need to quit fucking around. I'm going to buy some mobile home parks like 2021. Not that I was actually fucking around. I mean, I was going through that process, but it's just, I was pushing down the dominoes. And so when it came an opportunity to buy these parks, I was ready to pull the trigger. And I think that's important, whether it's a high market, low market, you got to go through the process. You have to talk to people. You have to build relationships. You have to analyze deals. People that say they're going to sit out and wait until, the market corrects or until they find a good deal, they're not going to be ready to pull the trigger when they find a good deal. No one's going to just say, hey, here's a deal. And the market's at an all-time low, buy this. It's like, you have to go through the process so you're ready when those properties come your way.
Well, let's be real. People have been saying we're at the peak or in a bubble for the last 4 years, right? I mean, when I was buying this 10 unit, people were telling me to stay away. The market might, who knows, we're high. I'm going to walk away with 3 years of my taxable income after taxes when I sell this thing because of growth. And I mean, that might not have happened, but it cash flowed the whole time I owned it. So I think that's the key, right? Can you hold it right now as the numbers are, whether it goes up or down? And I think that's huge. I mean, and if you, especially like you said, if you're getting in the process and you're talking to people and you're probably not finding, I mean, I don't know, you might have bought something on the MLS, but I would imagine that a large majority of what you're buying is off market deals or negotiations with people or just people who came and brought something to you or, I mean, the last 4 or 5 houses I've bought have been, while this market is crazy hot, nothing stays on the market, and they're all well under market value because I'm not hunting with real estate agent online. I'm finding my own deals, talking to other investors. And that comes from knowing the market and people knowing what you're looking for, right? I mean, the whole reason I'm selling my 10 unit is because someone knew that I had one and was like, oh, I know someone who's looking. Hey, would you be interested in offers? I'm like, sure. What do you got? And then it was a good offer. I'm like, oh, okay.
Exactly. And those relationships, it's all the above of what you just said, right? Like one of the mobile home parks was going to be listed. It was an in-house listing, but I had told this broker already because they kept sending me this A-class stuff. And I'm like, look, I'm looking for value add mobile home parks. And they're like, hey, we have this in-house listing. So I got access to this deal because I told her exactly what I was looking for, right? Like the next one was a guy that I had built a relationship previously with. He was a developer and he said, hey, my buddy's selling a single family home the town over. Are you interested? And I said, no, I'm not looking at single family right now. I'm focused on value add mobile home parks. And he said, I have a park. He goes, I have 5 parks. I'll sell it. One of them I'll sell you. And I said, would you sell or finance it? He said, yeah, I didn't know the guy owned mobile home parks. And he didn't know that I was looking until I told him specifically what I was looking for, right? The next one was because I told my property manager who managed the other two parks. I said, hey, I'm looking for parks. And because she's connected, she said, hey, this property, it was pending. It's going back on the market tomorrow. Here's the financials. Here's access to it. If you're interested, let me know and we'll put something in. So because I had gone through the process, because I analyzed enough deals, I was able to look at that and very quickly make a decision to make a strong offer. So every deal comes back to relationships and telling people.
Oh man.
And David, you real quick, like you said something that was just like so spot on with the cash flow, because people all the time say, oh, is it a good time to buy? Oh, what if we're at an all-time high? I think it's always a good time to buy if you buy right. And it comes down to cash flow. And I don't buy properties on speculation, right? Like I believe in upside, and most of my properties, they perform better than when I bought them because I see that upside that's there. I just never rely on that. A lot of my wealth has been built on the equity and the appreciation of these properties, but I've never banked on that appreciation. I've never banked on that equity. It was cash flow first. Does it work today? I don't care about the performer really, because I've never seen a performer that didn't look good. What has it done? What is it doing today? What's it been doing the last couple of years? Cash flow today. I like the way it works today. And there's upside. Hell yeah, I'm going to buy that.
Absolutely. Yeah. I tell people all the time, people want to get into VA loans and buy houses and they want to get their first house. And in my Facebook group, and I'm always like, look, I don't care what you buy, but don't ever buy a home. Buy an investment property that you're going to live in. And if you just have that mentality, just that little piece that like, hey, this needs to cover at least the mortgage, but hopefully all your expenses, right? But at least cover the mortgage. I had a buddy, cool dude, bought a house in Hawaii, and he owned it for 2 years, got orders elsewhere. And he was in this spot where if he didn't sell the house, he was going to be out of pocket almost $1,000 a month to rent it to somebody because the mortgage was $1,000 a month more than the market rent. And if he sold it, it hadn't appreciated as fast as it quote unquote should have. And he had only lived in it for 2 years. He was going to have to write a check for 20 grand to sell it. And so here's this guy who's in theory done everything right, but 20 grand out of pocket to sell it or lose $1,000 a month to hold it. Now, granted, I think he ended up, what I actually recommended to him was like, look, if you don't want to hold this, what you should do is because the VA loan's assumable, you should just find someone to assume your mortgage and just move on. That's like the win-win here. Like someone else takes your payments, whatever. I think he ended up holding it because he was like, I'm going to come back to Hawaii eventually. I can afford the $1,000 a month, whatever. Bad situation. But I mean, now over the last 2-3 years, he's good now, but that could have gone the other way. I mean, if the market had tanked in Hawaii, he'd be stuck paying $1,000 a month on a property he's underwater on. That's just, that's not the way to do it. Right. So the way to do it is to buy something that makes sense no matter what.
Yeah. And I mean, it's, I get people make large amounts of money in, like banking on appreciation and that upside. I just watched a lot of people get their ass kicked in 2008. And I listened to a lot of people. I mean, in 2008, I owned 3 houses, right? So I was listening to the people who got their ass kicked in 2008 that were much more experienced to me leading up to that, who said, we lost millions speculating. Now people made millions speculating as well, but a lot of people they didn't time it. And they were only banking on this property works if the rents go up. This property works if values continue to go up. And that worked for a while until it didn't. So this is just how I hedge my risk, right? Of, hey, if the property cash flows, I don't really care that much what the property's doing on paper. I don't sell very often. I mean, I actually sold a couple single family homes this last year. That's how I bought my last 2 mobile home parks. And that's kind of a cool story. It's 2 single family homes I put no money down on, sold those all these years later, 1031 that money into these mobile home parks. So I'm basically into these mobile home parks, no money out of pocket, essentially. And it's just, but it was, what's interesting about that, it's the cash flow, right? Those first couple of homes only cash flowed a few $100s a month. That's not what made me wealthy. But in 2020 to go, okay, these properties are now worth this much. I can keep cash flowing a little bit off these single family homes, or I can exchange that equity for some larger purchases, right? And it's the cash flow that got me to that position in 2020 to say, all right, I have options. And it's about that. I had options, right?
What's up, military millionaires? I wanted to briefly talk about a service I offer that a whole lot of people don't seem to know about, and I guess that's a failure on my part for not having discussed it enough. So look, finding a realtor that understands investing and or the VA loan or both is not always the easiest thing in the world. And finding a lender, same thing. So what I have started doing is I've built I have a large network, but I've started to compile it all together finally as a legitimate Excel document driven, location driven list for you guys, essentially. So what it is basically just my way of helping connect you with a realtor or a lender that I know personally and have vetted and talked to and understand that they're not going to screw you. And what I do is, like, for example, I had a market where I had 2 or 3 agents that I all sent the same person as a connection and said, hey man, I trust, I know all of these, let me know what you think. And they all said the same agent and same thing. So what I've done is if there's multiple agents in the same market, I choose the best one, and that's who I'm going to hook you up with. But the whole point of this is just to help ensure that you get connected to the best agent. So if that is something that you would like, just go to the website, go to FromMilitaryToMillionaire.com/VA-Realtor/ or just reach out to me on Instagram or Facebook, whatever. I'll send you the link, or you can find it on the resources page of the website. But look, all it is a way to help connect you with an agent who's going to hook you up. No, I don't charge a fee for you. No, I don't charge a fee for the agent. It's just a way to hook you guys up. At the end of the day, as a buyer, you're not going to pay for a realtor anyway. So, ta-da, it's magic. You might as well use one. As far as VA lender, I've got a really good one that I work with and know very well. There's several others that are pretty good, and I'll probably try to steer you away from some companies that I just don't think are very reputable or have been very helpful. So, if this is a service that sounds good to you for free $99, then reach out. And if not, then enjoy the show right now.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's the huge piece here, right? Is if you can't afford to hold the property, then it doesn't matter if it's going to appreciate. And people get wrapped up in it'll appreciate. Okay, fine. But how many properties can you buy at a negative cash flow?
Yeah,
I mean,
exactly.
not that many, right? So I think that's, if you want to scale, even if it's only $100 a month that you make on this property, real estate will appreciate over time unless you like buy in Detroit in the 1970s, but I think if you buy right, I think that's the key, right? So are you, so you're park owned homes. So this is four mobile home parks that you have now. Are you doing the old, try to sell off all the homes and just own the lots at this point?
Yeah, so it's interesting. So all these mobile home parks, I have a 43 unit, a 38 unit, and a couple 30 units. They all have some stick built on there. So a couple of the park, one of them has like an 8 unit stick built, like 8 studio apartments on the property. I have to own that. Some of the parks came with park owned homes. I've sold some of those back to tenants. I've seller financed some of those back to tenants. Some I've sold for cash. One of them I'm about to just give away because I just don't want it. There's more value in giving it away than doing all the maintenance required. And I don't manage these parks. I have great property management, in these parks, I rely heavily on good property management. I don't have on-site managers at any of my parks. They were on-sites when I bought them. For the majority of on-sites at the parks, the ones that I've bought, they have free rent and they're not really doing anything, right? And so that doesn't make sense. Yeah, so it's and then the value add component, we mentioned earlier kind of how like with multifamily, the value add component is a lot of these parks, if they're poorly managed, they're under rented, if there's some deferred maintenance. There's some small things like the first 2 parks I bought, rents hadn't been increased in 4.5 and 5 years. And utilities weren't being built back, and they were so below market rent. So one of the parks doing a really small increase in rent and 6 months later billing back utilities was a very low impact on the tenants. They're still below market rent. So low impact on the tenants, but that was a $30,000 a year net swing, a net profit on my part without spending any money, right? Now I put some money into the parks, but it was literally my property manager sending out a notice to the tenants. And 6 months later, this property, the NOI is up $30,000 a year. And there's just little things. One of the parks had 3 years worth of leaves covering 3 pads, a ton of leaves. It cost $600 to clean up leaves. That seems like a lot of money to clean up leaves, but those pads rent for $475 a month. It's a no-brainer, right? Like,
oh man,
exchanging $600 one time for $1,500 a month forever.
Leaves. That's something you don't hear every day, right? Like I mean, that's a crazy example. So I tell people all the time, people get so wrapped up in, they buy a property, they want to jack up the income because that's the sexy thing of real estate investing. But the most productive thing you can do is get rid of an expense like immediately, because that's finite. Like that's infinite. You can, if you cut an expense like taxes, or in your case, getting rid of a home that you would have to renovate and not having to do any of the maintenance on a home. I mean, that's a huge upside compared to, yeah, okay, you're making less income, quote unquote, if you're renting the lot instead of the home and the lot, but you're making so much better off by not having to do any of the headache, any of the expenses, any of the maintenance, any of the handyman stuff. Like, that's hilarious to me though, because that means whoever you bought the place from had thousands of dollars a month worth of leaves sitting there and just never leaves.
Yeah, and actually, the owner of that particular property is a fairly sophisticated investor, but his time and energy wasn't in the mobile home park space. So his time and energy was developing, and so he had a manager that managed it, but she lived far from the property. So even the manager's time and energy wasn't spent on the park. It wasn't being advertised. There wasn't a lot. So it wasn't even that he didn't know investing. His time and energy just wasn't on the park. Like that just wasn't his priority. So it created that opportunity. And I kind of, your question was also about, do I own the mobile homes? And you kind of answered that. Like, I don't want to own the mobile homes, right? Because the parks that I bought, when I look at the expenses from the previous owners, it's always on the park owned homes. It's always maintenance and repairs on the park owned homes. And then the tenants, when they own it, if they own their own home, their pride of ownership goes up. They want to clean the unit up. They want it to look nice. And if they're renting it, I mean, in a mobile home, sure, the rent might be higher, but you're going to get beat up in repairs and maintenance that would, not be any different than if they were paying pad rent and they were covering their own expenses and making the property look nice. So,
yeah, I mean, a personal example, I have a home right now. Me and my roommate bought it. We bought a small, 5-unit, 4-building portfolio that we took over from a lady. One of the homes is about an hour east of where we invest. I don't really want anything to do with it, but whatever. So I'm trying to convince the lady who is a tenant, her and her husband, to just basically, buy it via lease option from me. And we're in negotiations of, it's back and forth. But when I was home, I drove out there and it's got a lot of deferred maintenance. Like, it's one of those homes where the reason I'm trying to get rid of this thing is because I don't want them to move out and I get stuck with the bill repairing it. But I was talking to the lady and just trying to build rapport. And I asked her what her husband does. And the guy's a contractor. He does drywall and paint and, general home renovation type contractor stuff. I was like, oh. She's like, yeah. And there's all this. And she was kind of complaining about some of the stuff the previous landlord hadn't done. And we were kind of fixing some of it up for her. And she said it for herself. She was like, well, if we've thought about buying this place, the guy, well, if we owned it, we would just do all this. But because we don't own it, why are we going to do the maintenance ourselves? So we kind of just left it because we figured the landlord would deal with it when we move out. And I'm like, that's it. That's the golden ticket. Please buy this damn house and take care of it yourself. So I don't have to, because at this point, you're literally telling me you're just letting it go to rot because it's not yours. I mean, the pride of ownership thing is huge, because they're going to take way better care if they own it, or even if they don't end up executing the lease, if they think they're going to own it, or there's a chance they're going to own it, than they ever will as tenants. I think that's true of all of us. I think back to how I treated my dad's minivan when I was in high school compared to how I treat my cars. Yep. So the poor Honda Odyssey. But oh man, that's a really good point. But I think that's I don't own any mobile home parks. I would, if the opportunity comes around, I'd love to jump on one at some point. But when I first heard someone mention the idea of selling all the homes as fast as possible to just own the lots, that's such a great strategy. I love that aspect of mobile homes. I mean, that's just cool. You can't do that anywhere else.
Yeah. And, and it's just like within real estate, right? There's so many ways to be successful in real estate, even in the mobile home park space. I mean, there's guys that are doing large infills and, it's a high capital expense to bring in new homes, but there's guys doing that and girls doing that, and they're kicking ass doing that as well. So there's not just one way. With the parks that I own, it makes a lot more sense to sell these back than me bring in these brand new, homes and to have that huge capital expense. I'd rather get rid of the expense of the home and do it that way. But there's more than one right way. And that's how I've chosen to do it on these particular parks.
I love it. Love it. So what is Are you, I guess what's next? So you're still obviously prefer the seller financing side of the world. Is mobile home parks kind of the focal point for this year, or?
It is. Yeah, it is right now. I mean, I don't know if it'll always be that. Like I'm one that, I'll get focused, but I'm also willing to shift when I see changes. I think there's going to be opportunity in the commercial space with I think there's going to be, sadly, a lot of businesses shutting down, not reopening. But again, some of that would be speculation. And so, we'll see. But at this time, the mobile home park space is where I'm focused, 30 units and above. I really won't look at almost anything else besides 30 units and above, just to keep my focus. The first time I said that, I kept having all these like amazing single family homes sent my way. And I was like buying them. And I was like, I gotta stop because I need to. So I stopped looking at single family and right now focus on mobile home park space.
I like it. All right. So I'm going to kind of shift gears a little bit from the real estate side. So you've been effectively financially independent now for a decade, if not a little bit longer, actually.
Well, a little bit more. Yeah, a little bit more.
Yeah, which is phenomenal. And so I'm going to ask these questions as a guy who's headed that route this year, I guess, officially. Although, I'll still be in the reserves, so I guess not 100%, but whatever.
It's exciting. And that's exciting. I'm excited for you.
I'm stoked. Yeah, it can't come fast enough at this point. I finally, over the last 6 months, we mentioned before recording, I finally hit the point where I'm like, okay, yeah, I'm ready. The last year has been like, I think this is the right decision. The people that are saying that this is the right decision are the people I want to be in 10 years. And the people who are telling me that this is the wrong decision, I don't want their life. So, okay, I'm on the right track. But over the last 6 months, it's become obvious, like, okay, this is the right call. I'm in the right spot. This is going to be good.
And you know in your gut. I've talked to you enough times to know like you're ready. And then once you're there, it's like you have time and energy to be all in. Like you make it happen.
So that's kind of my question is I've been hearing from people, one of the harder things as I talk to guys like Alex or Felice or Doug Nordman or some of these guys who are completely independent, I've been hearing that it's a lot harder to be completely financially free than you think, like finding stuff to do with your free time and keeping yourself occupied. So I'm curious, obviously you're still doing real estate. So I think that's going to be me. I'm still going to run a business. I'm still going to keep myself busy. But I guess, is there anything you wish you'd known when you officially were done with the workforce that first time?
I don't know. For me, like I was really focused on that initial push, right? Like that initial, like, hey, I want to be financial free. And it was about the money and it was about the building the wealth. But, I had to reflect on that a little bit, right? Like there was a period of time where like I was so obsessed with it that it became an unhealthy thing, right? Like it almost ruined my marriage. Like my wife and I separated for, just getting vulnerable here. Like, we separated for 6 months when the kids were, 2 and 4, around like 2.5, 4.5, 5, something, and that was hard because, I was so focused on that. And I realized I had put all my time and energy into, and it wasn't even my time and energy. It was like, that's where my mind was at. I was so focused on my dream of what I wanted to do. And it wasn't until kind of that moment, I was like, what am I doing? What am I actually building? What's actually important to me? And I realized, I had read these books on real estate. I'm studying real estate. I'm focused on real estate. Had I ever read a marriage book? Have I read a parenting book? Have I, all the other aspects of my life. And it was interesting. Once I got away from focusing on the real estate and the money and that, and was really more focused on the personal development, it was really a reflection of like, what do I want? I want to be the best version of myself. How do I become the best version of myself? Once my focus became there, everything in my life started to prosper, including the real estate, right? So I was less focused on that because what I realized is it wasn't even the money that I was after. Like I didn't want to just swim in a pile of money. What I wanted was the freedom of my time. I wanted to be able to hang out with my family. I wanted to be able to raise my children, like be there with them, right? And I've gotten to do that. I want to be able to travel. My health is important to me. I want to be able to, work out when I want to work out. And so it was kind of a journey, and it was a journey of being very focused on the money and very focused on the wealth. But when I really got real and asked myself, why? Like, what do I really want? It was like, well, shit, my marriage is important to me. Like my relationship with my wife is important. My relationship with my kids are important. Like I want to be there. So I better remember why I'm doing what I'm doing. And then I really started to build my life around that, around the concept of time freedom and really what are the couple things in my life that are most important to me. And when I'm making a decision, I just have to ask myself, does this align with time with my family, the ability to travel, does this align with my health goals, whatever it might be. And in some ways, the real estate is in a lot of ways second to that, but also supports that lifestyle. So yeah, I'm not sure it answered your question, but that's kind of where my journey went.
No, that's good. So, I mean, while we're being somewhat vulnerable, right? I'm geo-bachelor right now. So about a year and a half ago, I moved to California, and in the time frame of moving here, my wife got a job offer at her old school in Missouri, and I have a stepson, and Dad didn't really want kid not living in Missouri, and there was just a lot of stuff. So they moved back to Missouri about a year and a half ago, with the intent that she's a school counselor, so she can come out for the whole summer. She can come out for Christmas, spring break, fall break. I can go there, yada, yada, yada. Then pandemic happened and we saw each other twice last year. And it has been, terrible. Like I thought in my head, like, oh yeah, this would just be like a deployment, oh yeah, 6 months, a year, don't see your kids. Like, yeah, but when you forget on a deployment, it's like a mission. You got all this cool stuff. You're hanging out with the guys. And I was basically coming home to an empty house every night. Finally got a roommate and things have started to go. It hasn't been easy at all. And that's kind of one of my fears is like, I'm kind of a workaholic, I guess. So like, okay, I'm going to find things to fill my void. So I'm going to be very intentional when I go back about, okay, you just set like specified work hours. I need to make sure there are days or months or whatever, where I am not doing the grind and hanging out with the family, because I've seen that suffer. I mean, we've not been great over the last year, and not because we aren't per se, but just because of circumstances. So I could totally see. So I appreciate the vulnerability there, because I can see getting wrapped up in that focus and being like, oh man. So
well, and what it really fears. Yeah, what it came down to was my own bullshit. Like I was so focused on my dreams, right? Like I didn't make it a we thing, right? And so it's once I got clear on what's really important, then it's easier to make that decision, right? So like now it's a lot more we, like we're a family unit, right? Like we actually pulled our kids from school. We bought an RV today, and like we're gonna, when we get back from Hawaii, we're gonna hit the road, like because I'm clear, and it was easy to make that decision. It was I shouldn't say it was easy, because there was some time leading up and a lot of conversation, but we chose to do that today because that's my family, right? That's my wife, that's my kids, like that's what's important to me, and so it's easier to make those decisions when you're clear on those things that are most important, because then you can say, hey, does this decision, does this thing I'm being asked to do, does that align with these couple things that are most important in my life? If they align with that, say yeah. And if it doesn't, say no as fast as you can and move on to something that supports the things that are most important in your life.
I like that. I mean, that's a concept that a lot of people talk about on the business side, but not a lot of people mention it on the family side. And it's just as important to be clear on what adds to your relationship. And I love that you mentioned marriage books. I mean, I've definitely read a couple of those types of books this year. And that's helped a ton. You just need to buy some mobile home parks all around the country, so you can park your, RV in your own place as you travel. Right.
Right.
That's cool.
You know what? I didn't even, until you just said it, I'm realizing like, I'm going to have to park this thing somewhere, right? Like I'm going to get to see a lot of the country. So
just call Brandon. He's got some places all over the place now. Right. So
right. That's some serious driving for dollars.
That's valid, right?
Absolutely.
That's funny you say that. I mean, it's kind of funny to say, but legitimately, what better way to get to know park owners, I guess, than staying in their park?
Right.
You never know what you're going to come across if you're looking for it. That's cool. Well, I guess, before we kind of wrap stuff up, I would just ask, what's next? Is there anything we missed in this? What other, it sounds like you've got some pretty cool things going on in your life these days.
Yeah. I mean, I don't know. The biggest thing is like, I enjoy just encouraging others, man. I get real excited when I hear, young, not necessarily age, but newer investors just getting excited about real estate. Like that's one of my favorite things is when someone reaches out and they tell me like, hey, I just did my first real estate deal, or I just did my first seller financing deal, or every once in a while, like, hey, I'm financially free. Like that excites me. And so, I mean, for your listeners, like I truly believe if someone wants it bad enough, if someone really, really wants that financial freedom and I think real estate is a great, if not the greatest tool to do that with. And I encourage anyone, like, I don't know anyone, I guess, who has invested in real estate long-term, stuck with it, and not found some level of success. So, and kind of to break that down, even like every single property I've ever purchased, there's not a single property I've purchased that I regret buying. And every single one of those, I also could have found a reason not to buy it. I just can't think of a greater vehicle of building wealth and a more leverageable asset than real estate.
I agree. And I think that you just hit the nail on the head with the phrase, every property you could find a reason not to buy, because there are definitely people out there who talk themselves out of buying stuff. And, there's always a reason not to do something, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
Running. There are plenty of mornings. There's a reason for me not to go run. But there's a lot of benefits to running, and it's just kind of playing the long game, right?
Absolutely. Yeah.
That's cool. All right, I got a couple questions I ask everyone before we roll up. The first, and I think you might have already mentioned this, but if you have, like, what's one piece of advice that you would give to an E1, E2, 18-year-old about life in general, I guess, but real estate too, whatever.
Yeah, I mean, the biggest thing is if you have a dream, like if there's something that you want in life, go for it. Go all in. I mean, I'm a big believer in tripling down on your strengths and knowing what those are, knowing what's important to you, and going all in.
I like it. And then what's a resource, book, course, website, whatever that you'd recommend to anybody getting started in real estate?
Gosh, I mean, there's this great podcast, Military to Millionaire. I mean, not a bad place to start. I do think the podcasts are great because you get so many different, I didn't know of, podcasts. I didn't know Bigger Pockets when I got started, but I think all these podcasts are such a great resource, especially as ones where you're getting guests on, because they're all doing it differently. And there's so many different ways to be successful within real estate. You might hear one person say one thing and it just click, right? Like it just click and that's what you dive into. And so I think the podcasts are really a great way to learn.
I like it. I'm a fan. I mean, obviously, but I've become even more fan since hosting one. When I first started this podcast, I was like, oh yeah, it'll be cool. Basically someone who was more successful than me told me I should start a podcast. So I did. And I very quickly realized that the benefit to podcasting was that I would get 30 to 45 minutes where I could ask questions of people who I might not normally get their time, right? I've had some people on this show before where I'm like, man, if I'd called that guy and been like, hey, can I have like 45 minutes to an hour of your time where I just ask questions? No. Not happening. Sorry. Like I ain't got that time for you to pick my brain. But if you're like, hey, I've got this podcast that reaches a whole bunch of people and I'd like to, share your expertise, it's a win-win. And then I still get to ask people like you questions about like, hey, how do you survive financial freedom? Like without going crazy?
Yeah.
It's been incredibly beneficial. And I still listen to podcasts all the time. I love it.
Yeah. Same here. I mean, it's that continuous education, right? I mean, there's things all the time. Like, I never think I'm going to know it all. In fact, the more I learn, I don't know. And so I want to keep learning more. And I hear things all the time where I'm like, oh my gosh, I didn't think of it quite that way. Yeah. I've never heard of that, or I never heard of that way of doing it, and I think that's important to just have in your ear.
I agree 100%. All right. Where can people reach out if they want to get a hold of you? I know you have an awesome Instagram. What's your Instagram?
Gabriel
Hamel, is it?
Yeah, Gabriel R. Hamel. If you just search Gabriel Hamel, you'll find me. So fairly active on Instagram. That's probably the best way to message me. I have the website at Hamel. It's just hamelinvestments.com. I'll load up this podcast when it airs, this episode when it airs, and there's a bunch of other podcasts I've been on there as well.
Awesome. And your Instagram is great. You got some good quotes on there. You're a bigger account than I am, and you're always showing cool stuff that you're up to. So I follow it for sure. One of the few Instagram accounts that I actually see on my feed because I actually engage with it. The more my channel grows, the more I'm like, okay, I got to get rid of that distraction and that distraction. I need to just post and not focus on things. So I don't follow too many people anymore, but I definitely see your stuff. So
no, I appreciate that. And I enjoy your content as well. So.
Well, thanks, Gabriel. This is a pleasure. Always a pleasure. I look forward to, post-pandemic, whenever meetups start happening again, getting to hang out again at whether it's BP Con or wherever we run into each other next, Maui, who knows? But This has been good, brother. And I thank you very much for being a guest.
Yeah, thank you, David. I appreciate it truly.
Thank you for listening to another episode about my journey from military to millionaire. If you liked it, be sure to visit FromMilitaryToMillionaire.com/podcast to subscribe to future podcasts. While you're there, we'd love for you to rate the show, give us a review on iTunes. Now get out there and take action.